Welcome. I'm Dee Perry, and I am welcoming you to the Cleveland International Film Festival's official podcast, CIFF Speaks. It's day 4 of CIFF43, and I'm here with my producer, Aaron Spears. Hey, Aaron.
Hello. Hello, film fans.
And for both of us, I think as the festival has been unfolding, it's triggered memories of past festivals we've attended.
It has. I was thinking of the different people I've attended the festival over the years, and there was one person that always surprised me because it was usually people that I knew were interested in films or a topic, but there was one year my dad popped up and just was like, hey, I know you're in the festival tomorrow. Is there a way I can grab tickets and go with you? And I should say my dad was much more like the sports guy, basketball, softball, little soccer, playing and watching. And I was the kid in the family who was into the arts and theater, live theater, musicals, film history. And I was like, sure, Dad, that sounds great. But I also go for more like risque and a bit more avant-garde and crazier films, I guess is how he would say. And so I immediately went to my program guide, like, what am I watching tomorrow? Luckily, though, it was the documentary Spellbound about the Scripps National Spelling Bee. So I was like, oh, okay, perfect intro, for that. So he ended up, falling in love with the festival as, everybody does once you're down there and you see it. And it just became a regular thing we used to do for years and years. He would just pick a day and I would kind of curate it so it wasn't too, crazy. And then come down and watch some movies together, at least one day during the festival. And speaking of being a sports fan, there is one quick heads up we have for everybody today. The Cleveland Monsters are playing a game at 7 p.m. tonight at the Q. So if you're coming down to the festival this evening, which, it's Saturday night, that's a lot of people.
Yeah.
We always do recommend you use RTA or Lyft to just get you right there to the front door. No parking, no hassle.
Yeah, great tips. It takes a lot to put on a festival, a lot of volunteers, a lot of patrons, and definitely a very dedicated staff. And one of those folks you're going to hear from on this edition of CIFF Speaks is Bill Guentzler. Bill is really the man behind the screens as he programs, along with Mallory Martin, the hundreds of films that are showing up on all the screens around town. One of the ways that those films are organized is through something called Sidebars. And how did those evolve?
Sidebars are groupings of films by either theme or setting or area of origin, like in the world. And it helps our audiences select films because, choosing from over 200 films can be really, really difficult in finding what you want to see. And so this is our way of putting them into categories that if you're interested in something, you can focus on these films first.
And I confess that even as a veteran festival goer, I usually gravitate first toward film is art because it just gives me a starting point to say, okay, there's this variety of things that connect the thing that I worked in a long time and the thing that I love, film and art, I'm there.
Yeah.
And then it gives me a grounding so I can spread out to maybe lots of random films that I know nothing about.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What are some that people have talked a lot about in terms of having an impact on them? Well,
I think Film is Art is a perfect example because we started that, sidebar a few years ago, and it really has become popular just by making that sidebar and pulling these films out and focusing on them. People are able to notice them a little bit. I mean, I love the fact that we have our family films sidebar. That's really important to us. We, start our audience young. And something else that I love is our Women of the World sidebar. It's our largest sidebar year after year because it focuses on, strong women.
Yeah, and that's an ongoing theme in this year's festival especially.
Exactly.
Going back to like the start of it real quick, what would prompt you to create a sidebar? Like if you notice a trend when you're at other festivals seeking out features, or like what would kick one off for the first year?
It's actually, we look at, we have our sidebars that we have right now and we try to fill those up. And if something doesn't look like it's likely, we might take a year off, which we have done in the past. And sometimes we'll look at the program once we're finished and really see a theme running through a lot of the films. And so this year we started a sidebar called Strangers in a Strange Land, which focuses on refugees and immigrants and people of different cultures and crossing that cultural divide. And we think that's really, really, really important now, more so every day when you look at the news. And so I think that something like that we feel really strongly about.
Another sidebar that used to be called something else. This year is Watch Out with an exclamation point.
Yeah, so Watch Out. It's a it's a little pun because it used to be called 10% Cinema, and that was our focus on LGBT films and filmmakers. And I think a lot of people lost the meaning of 10% because for a long time, there was the essentially a colloquialism that 10% of the public was LGBT. And now we know, one, that it's probably a lot larger than 10%, and we don't want to keep that definition going. So watch out, you come out of the closet. And so watch out, exclamation point, because you're watching films about out people.
In terms of new sidebars, Watch Out is a continuation of one that's been around. Strangers in a Strange Land is new. What else on?
And actually, that's the new sidebar. Last year, or either last year or the year before, we started Voices of the Arab World, and those are films in Arabic. And we thought that was very important because it's kind of like another cinema en español, which we started years and years ago, and those are films in Spanish. But you look at something like Nordic Adventures, which is a Scandinavian films that's in and out. It depends on how much we get, but our audience loves those films, and so we really, really try to get a good sidebar going for that.
I'm one of those audience members that loves the Scandinavian ones.
Yeah.
The sense of humor that comes from a lot of those Nordic countries is just great.
Me too.
To me.
I love it.
And I always get nervous when I open it up and it's like, oh, it's not there this year. So I'm glad to hear that it is it's not necessarily out entirely if it's not in there one year. So it can come back.
We'll still have the films, but we just want to make sure that we have a good sidebar.
Right.
Yeah.
So you need to have like a certain number. Like if you only have a few Scandinavian films one year, maybe it wouldn't be a whole sidebar.
Yeah. Film is art actually kind of came organically as people talking, where it's like, oh, you have a lot of art films this year. And we looked at the next year and we're like, oh, we still have a lot of art films. And so, things do grow because when Mallory and I are watching the films throughout the entire year, we're not looking at those connective little things. And then when we talk about the program as a staff, they have, the staff hasn't seen all the films. So we get those suggestions, as the pass holders are seeing their 50th film, they're like, hey, I noticed a lot of this in the festival. By then it's too late, but at least those are things that we can look
noted
at
for next year.
Exactly.
Yeah. That was actually one of my last questions for you was, since the sidebars are a good way to help individuals curate their festival experience, do you have like that checklist in your pocket when you're out at festivals searching for films or noticing stuff like, oh, that would fit real well with this one? Or...
Yeah, definitely. That's definitely something that Mallory and I look at. And then even like if we're at a festival and we have an option of seeing 3 films, we'll look at that description and be like, oh, that will be perfect for, this sidebar. And these 2 films, while they seem cool and good, let's try to get that one or see that one for that sidebar.
That makes me think of one last thing. When you are visiting all these festivals, do you find them organized as well as a CIFF?
Of course not. I mean, it depends. I mean, most festivals have, like a official competition, which has no real definition other than their premieres. And some have specialized focused competitions and something like sidebars where it's like, some European festivals have the American section or something like that. But nothing as robust as our sidebars, which I enjoy.
And we appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, Bill Guentzler.
Thank you.
Our thanks to Bill Guentzler, who is the Artistic Director for the Cleveland International Film Festival. I'm Dee Perry, and you're listening to CIFF Speaks. And there are so many things going on at the festival, but one of my favorite parts of it is the film forums. The films are often centered around difficult subjects, but it gives the audience a chance to weigh in on those subjects and to hear from experts. And Aaron, the film forum for today is what?
Well, it is a pretty difficult subject matter, as you said. This one is A Girl Named C. It is at 4 p.m. today. And it's a documentary about the life-altering sexual assault, the rape of an 11-year-old. And it deals, obviously, with a lot of very heavy, very big themes there. And the topic that the panel is going to be discussing, and also the audience as well, is how do we find words for the unspeakable? And this is also one of those films too, where a lot of the community engagement is going to be going on. So there are partnerships going on. So if you do need specific resources, there's going to be people there to chat with. And also one of the things I like as well about the film forums, as you mentioned, was it does sort of tie things into societal ills that, are within Cleveland and show some of what the support system that is there for survivors or victims.
Yeah. And on the note of things that connect you to the community, I've got to say that we are really pleased to say that RTA and Lyft are providing support for getting folks to and from the festival in style for CIFF43. I want you to know that all RTA trains and many bus lines provide direct service to Tower City Center, and our official rideshare Lyft offers discounts for existing customers. You can get that at Lyft2CIFF. That's Lyft, the number 2, and CIFF. And for new customers, it's Lyft CIFF Newbie. Newbie spelled Newbie. To keep up with everything CIFF, visit clevelandfilm.org, follow CIFF on social media, or use the CIFF app. I'm Dee Perry.
And I'm Aaron Spears.
And thank you for listening to CIFF Speaks.